Hello, people. Good afternoon and good evening for everyone who's watching us. And today we are in one more episode of our program, Consciousness in Evolution. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I have a very special guest that is instructor Regina Tschud from Germany. And we are going to talk about how to solve and how to deal with inner conflicts. Because as human beings, we are constantly, every day, dealing with inner conflicts. And I think also that our evolution is very much related to the way we face and deal with these conflicts every day. It's very challenging, but there are techniques. We can make use of these techniques to have a better life, better interaction with people. And that's why we are going to discuss this theme today. So feel free to send us any questions and also to tell us how do you usually solve or deal with your inner conflicts, okay? So let's welcome our teacher, Regina Tschud. Welcome, Regina. I'm going to introduce her to you because many of you don't know her. Regina holds a degree in business administration and is the project manager of an e-learning platform for medical professionals. She's also educated in mediation. Regina was born and lives in Frankfurt, Germany, and has been a volunteer of Conscientiology since 2007. She's currently volunteering at ISIC and at the One More Year of Intraphysical Life Technique, and is also engaged in translation projects. She's a member of the Invisible College of Pacifismology, and besides this, she's volunteers in a hospital, accompanying terminal patients in the process of the soma, that is the physical death. So welcome, Regina. It's a great
Hello, Eliane. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here and to talk about this topic because, I think it's very interesting and I think it's really an accelerator in our evolution. So thanks a lot for the opportunity.
Great.
Thanks.
So I will share the slides and you can start at any time.
Great. Yes, as I said, I would like to talk to you today about dealing with inner conflicts. And Eliane told about solving inner conflicts. And of course, this is a process and this is nothing that comes to us quickly. But I would like to try to show some techniques that are proposed by Conscientiology so that we can approach this topic, And I don't know if you're a first timer, so if you're familiar with Conscientiology or not. So I'll do my very best in order to explain it in a way that we can all approach. And I would like to have your comments, your questions, and I give my best to interact with you. Okay. Unfortunately, we could not have a real debate in this format, but I hope we will be able to interact as well. Okay, so let's start. First of all, I would like to introduce the principle of disbelief. If you already saw some lives of Conscientiology, you know this already. And we encourage people, don't believe in anything. So even not what I'm telling here today, experiment and have your own experience, because this is very important in Conscientiology that we're having our own experience. Okay. So first of all, I would like to give a kind of roadmap that could lead you through this life today. So first of all, I would like to clarify, okay, what is an inner conflict? Because sometimes we think everyone knows what that is, but we would like to go into this in a more technical way. And then I would like to talk about other stuff, like here, the categories of inner conflicts, right? And how to identify the self-conflict. And I would like to propose some techniques which I have personal experience with. And just to give you some of them. For sure, there are a lot of more techniques within Conscientiology. And so I needed to limit myself in order to try to give an idea of how you can approach your inner conflicts, right? And I hope we can also have some reflections, and I would be very pleased if you would share them with me. Okay, first of all, I said we would like to do a kind of definition. What is a self-conflict? And I found this one here from Maximiliano Heimann from his book. I have this also listed in the reference, so no worries. You can find that in the end of the presentation where you can find all this interesting stuff. And what he put there is a self-conflict is the ambivalent state of tension or suffering accompanied by doubt, indecision, imprecision, uncertainty, or obscurity caused by a clash of interest, ideas, emotional or motivational forces, incompatible, antagonistic, or mutual exclusive in intraconsentiality. What does that mean? Intraconsentiality, this is our personal structure, the structure of the consciousness. And I would like to go more deep into this during the next slides, okay? So, the inner conflict. I found very interesting to have a look at this scale. This scale is from Professor Dr. Angelika Wagner. She wrote this already in 2007. And what she tried to approach is that we have a kind of level of inner conflicts. And what she observed was that there are certain states of the consciousness. So first of all, the level 1 you can see here is the absolute inner peace. So it's a kind of lack of an inner conflict. The second level, immersion flow experience. This is the feeling of oneness, great inner clarity, flow experience. This is also a state where we would say, okay, there is no really conflict involved. Then we have the relaxation, the immersion. This is the level 3. And there is decreased arousal. So you're already or still in a state that is quite calm. The everyday waking consciousness, awake, capable of action. So this is the state that we are more or less are normally in during our daily waking state, right? And then there could be a state, this is the level 5, where you feel somehow the inner conflict already arise. So you have stress, you have some stress responses, you try to cope, but you still master to keep this inner conflict on a certain level so that you can cope with this. Then we come to the state of acute conflict, which is you feel stress, you feel anxiety, you feel kind of dilemma, anger, depression, and so on. So this is already increasing. So you feel already quite tense. And then you have the level 7, which is the escalating acute conflict, right? In this status, you feel sometimes what we call a blackout, you're panicking and so on. So you have this really acute inner conflict that you really are not able anymore to hold. This is what we sometimes experience. And I think this is very interesting to have this in mind so that you can have the goal to already deal with the inner conflict if you feel, okay, now I'm coming to the level 5. Now I'm already having some stress in order to master this inner conflict.
Very interesting, Regina. Super interesting. This scale. Is this Dr. Angelica Wagner a psychologist? I don't know her. Can you tell us about?
She is from the department of the university in Hamburg, and she's studying these inner conflicts and these topics for a long time already. So she's really a veteran in this. She did a lot of research, I think for more than 20 years already. And she wrote a lot of books about this topic. And she also proposed a technique to deal with inner conflicts, which is called introvision. So this is something that I studied. It's not stemming from Conscientiology, but I found it very interesting because there are a lot of parallels in the concepts. And therefore, I wanted to bring this up here because these scales, I think they are very interesting to have in mind to see how we can deal with the inner conflict.
Okay. And Regina, I have a question here from Anna Yogan. And it's a tough question because she's asking, what are the biggest conflicts people have when they are actively dying? That is something that Anna is a researcher. She studies the soma,
Yes.
the process of dying.
Yes.
And what is your experience related to that as you deal with terminal patients?
Yes, thank you very much, Anna. That's an interesting question. And I also saw your life, so I found it very interesting because you're dealing with this topic as well. Well, I think for sure there are a lot of different kinds of topic. For sure, one of the conflicts that we have is this fear that we have of the desoma, the act of the physical dying, like we call it. And for sure, most people, they don't want to die. For them, the desoma or the dying is the biggest catastrophe. But on the way to this process, depending in which situation they are in, let's suppose they are suffering from a terminal illness, for example, there are some other fears, just to mention some for sure. They don't want to leave their life. They don't want to leave their relatives, their loved ones, for example, but also other topics like, I have so much to do still in this life, so I'm not ready to go. These are just some of those conflicts. And in my work as a volunteer in the hospital, I try to figure out with a patient what is the main conflict, so to speak, and I try to give some support in order to deal with this. But this question is very, how can I say, the topic has so many facets. It's really interesting in that far that each case is a case. It's that individual like every one of us.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Regina.
I would like to continue if we don't have further questions so far.
Okay, so far you may continue.
Okay. So I would like to talk a little bit about the categories of inner conflicts. And some of them we already approached related to the question that Anna raised. But there are some categories. They also are from the book from Maximiliano Heimann that I already introduced a little bit. And he has these 10 categories of inner conflicts. And I would like to read this to you because it's some interesting stuff here. Okay. And the approach conflict is arising from the choice between two equally desirable but incompatible goals. And he gives an example. The desire to maintain a satisfying and stable affective relationship or to accept an attractive proposal for working abroad. So this could be a conflict that we need to tackle and to see how could we decide this. The next one is ambivalence arising when the objective has both desirable and undesirable aspects or consequences. And there's the example moving to a city full of opportunities for personal growth, and the consequence decrease in frequent contact with the nuclear family. For example, what comes to my mind, people think a lot of terms of times to move, for example, to Foz, because there you have a big opportunity of personal growth, but not only there, of course, but also you can move to other cities. So I think there is a lot of inner conflict you have to deal with when you think of moving to another city or another country and to leave the comfort zone that you had before and being connected to your loved ones. For example, the self-image conflict is a situation caused by divergence between the idealized self-image and the public personal image. So here's also an example. Maybe today I want to give a lecture that is really helpful for the public here, but for sure there could be the problem, okay, what if the people don't like me, or if I'm doing something wrong, English is not my native language, and so on. So that's a good example for this self-image conflict. Then we have the avoidance conflict. So self-conflict situation involving the choice between two equal unpleasant alternatives. So here's the example that he gives. The administrator's doubt who lost the client's money in the financial market between informing him immediately or waiting for him to seek information on the investment result. So both situations are unpleasant. So this is causing inner conflict in the administrator, of course. Then conflict of intentions. Situation of self-conflict in which it is recognized to have two or more divergent, competing intentions and incompatible qualities. Here's an example. The person integrating an interassistential team, in fact, interested in helping, but not without the intention of obtaining some personal, secondary, and egoistic benefits. Then we have the number 6, which is the state of tension. And I want to remind you of the scale, right? That tension is a very important keyword when it comes to dealing with inner conflict. So you need to have an eye on that. So the state of tension and suffering caused by inconsistent or discordant expectations associated with personal, social, or group roles. So this could be very clear. we have this day to day in the workplace. For example, if you consider yourself more qualified than a colleague, for example, but then you are really in a conflict if the other conflict is chosen by the manager, for example. But then the seventh is a conflict of value. And I think we talked about this in one of the last lives that we had here when it comes to dilemmas that we could really have during our day-to-day life. And I remember, for example, Anna raised an interesting question there as well when she was asking in this process of the soma, what is there if someone wants to have assistance in a desoma process, for example. And I think it is a really high-level conflict for a medical doctor, for example, if a patient asks for such an assistance. And this is a really huge conflict of values that is there. And it is really interesting and serious to deal with such a conflict if you're working in a hospital, right? And you could be really confronted with that. And I think you have to have the time to think about this, how to deal with such a conflict, and to see what is best for the person, right? Eliane, do you want to ask something?
No, I just want to comment that it's very good to have these categories for us to analyze, because, for example, sometimes we are very much hold into number 3, self-image conflict.
Right.
And it ends up being something very superficial if we analyze it, if we imagine us in a more difficult situation. If we have some kind of disease to deal with, either with us or our beloved ones. And so self-image would be secondary, tertiary, which, and another thing that I'm thinking about when I see these categories is that what is very important is that we keep in mind that we have to try to be flexible, to have flexibility, to have openness. Because if we are in a conflict, we are in suffering, we are kind of discomfort. And if we get too much attached to our self-image, to our personality, to our material stuff, I think it's going to be much difficult. So if we are more open, more flexible, try to analyze and see the things in the multidimensional way, that could help.
This is true. Yeah, that's true. And sometimes we think that, for example, okay, a self-image conflict, this is not really serious. But the people that have this conflict in that moment, actually, for them, it is serious, right? Sometimes if we have a more like a kind of meta view and we can step back a little bit from this conflict that we have, then hopefully we can laugh about that. But sometimes in the moment, right, for the people, it's really a problem. For example, if you have to give a presentation in your workplace, for example. So for them, it's serious. People can't even breathe sometimes if they have to do such a presentation, right?
It's true. It's true, Regina. I had students who in college, in university, they had to present their work of conclusion. And wow, it was super difficult for them. It's all related to self-image. Everyone, I think everyone came across that once in life.
Yes, definitely.
I'll wait for you to finish to explain the categories, and I have one more question for you from Tenil Vicenzi, and I have another one. I have two questions for you, so I'll do them in a while.
Great. All right. So I think desire reason number 8, right? That was the next one. Situation of self-conflicting arising from the incompatible and antagonism of personal desire before the rational ideal of the evolutionary moment. So example is here, the strong personal impulse to consume a certain drug. When aware of the importance of abstinence due to the harm that addiction has brought to you and to your personal companions. Okay, the number 9 is also interesting. Relative belief conflict is the situation of self-conflict between personal beliefs and the facts or parafacts experienced. For example, the conscious projector with difficulty in abandoning the Christian belief, even though he had this lucid projection and he could prove to himself that the concept doesn't work for him anymore. And then we have the religious conflict, which arises from the situation that you are still attached to the religion, right? But for example, you're a mother and you have to give the permission that your child has a certain treatment that is in conflict to the religious beliefs. So this could be a huge conflict as well. So in that sense, religious beliefs or dogmatism could cause really huge internal conflicts.
Very interesting. I do agree. Religion is something that people are usually very attached to the dogmas, to what they learned, and they are afraid of committing the what we call sins. And that's it's very repressing. If a person could get free, could free themselves from this religious conflict, many others gonna be easier because they are the root for all their other conflicts. I suppose it's at least in my experience, I see this way. Religion can help in some way in some situations, but when we want to go deep in evolution, we are going to see that it's a lot of dogmas and repression that doesn't help much.
Yes, that's
It has its limits.
I think that's true. I think everything that narrows our mind and brings this kind of this narrow-mindedness is a problem if we want to free ourselves from inner conflicts, because everything that minimizes us in the application of our mental soma, for example, that's a problem. So sometimes the conflicts could be very small and they are easy to approach if we are aware of them, and sometimes they are really huge. And also related to mesology. Mesology is what we call the influence of our intraphysical society, our culture, for example, the things that we learn and that we are brought up with, for example, they could also bring a lot of internal conflict, for example, related to our status as intermissivist, for example. If you're intermissivist and you try to get along with the mesology, this could sometimes be a problem for you internally, because you have sometimes these beliefs that we have in our culture. For example, death is the worst. If you die, everything is lost, for example. And this brings internal conflict if we start to study the things that we have in Conscientiology, and also if we have these ideas that we have from our intermissive course, that we have the consensual paradigm, that there is life after death, for example, this could be a problem if you want to approach this, right?
Hey, Regina, can you let us know or clarify our viewers what is the intermissive course? What is an intermissivist?
All right. Intermissivist is a person that attended an intermissive course. This is when we are in the intermissive period. So this is the time between one introphysical life and the other. And we approach a course in order to evolve, in order to continue with our evolution.
Good.
I want to leave it with that, okay?
Very okay. And I have a question from Tenil. Tenil is saying, "Hi, Regina. I'm glad to hear
Hi.
from you. It's a very interesting approach. I have a doubt if those states are temporary. But as we evolve, we probably keep longer in states 1, 2, and 3. I suppose it's about the scale that you showed in the other slide. She's referring to the states 1, 2, and 3 of the scale.
Right.
If you wanna, you can go back to the previous slide where you have the scale.
Okay. Yes, I think you're right, Tinile. Hi, first of all. I think if you're a person that is already evolved, that you have more time, that you are in this scale 1 to 3 or 1 to 4. You know, if you're dealing with introphysical life, I think you're also in state 4. And I think with time, and I'm coming to this later on, with time, when we evolve, we minimize the number of conflicts, the inner conflicts that we have. I want to go to the next slides in order to explain that a little bit better, okay? But keep it in mind. The approach that I would like to show here is the identification. So how do we identify that we have the inner conflict, to see what could be a right strategy to apply that, and to have a self-clarification through this application of the strategy, and this results in a self-re-education. And the question is how to identify the inner conflict. And the approach that I really love is to identify it by taking a look at our holosoma. And the holosoma, we explained this already in some lives before. I recommend the live that Eliane gave about the holosoma. There you can revisit this in detail. But just to have in mind what that is, it is the sets of these 4 bodies that we have: the soma, the energosoma, the mental soma, and the psychosoma, okay? So in that sense, because this is what we have, right? This is our instrument that we deal with every day, and that we can try to tune in and try to make better throughout our evolution. So for example, what I told before in the beginning, if you have a conflict, the inner conflict, think about the conflict I was talking about, the self-image conflict. It's obviously in the soma already, because you have something in the throat, you can't speak, you're nervous, for example, you're sweating and all of that. So in the soma already, you can experience this inner conflict, okay? And then you can check on the energetic level. So is the energy stuck? Is it inflexible, for example? So this is something that you can observe. And also the tension that I was talking about, and also on the emotionally level, right? So you have anxiety, for example. So you can't think properly, for example. This is the effect on the mental soma. So in that sense, you can identify, right, in this set of vehicles of manifestation. And to go deeper in this is the first approach that I would recommend in order to analyze the inner conflict on a deeper level. In order to see the intraconsensual structures, so part of that is the holosoma, but also other attributes that I will show you in a minute. And this instrument here, the Conscientiogram, it's a book written by Vieira, and he has the reference of the Homo sapiens serenissimus, which is a very evolved consciousness with a way longer evolution than we had already, and which is free of inner conflicts. So this is the, how can I say, our reference where we can see, okay, Homo sapiens serenissimus has this kind of attitudes in his manifestation, and how is our status?
Yeah. Regina, we can say that Homo sapiens serenissimus is our evolutionary model. If we can put this way, right? You would take the maximum marks in Conscientiogram.
That's true, right. And as I said, the Conscientiogram is revisiting the part of the holosoma, which is here in the first line. And in the second line, you can also see there are other attributes of the consciousness. For example, how do you manifest in your leadership, in your communicability, the prioritization, the coherence, and so on. So if you check your marks, as Eliane said, we call this, we measure, we have a conscientiometry. Then you can have an idea where are parts that you are already well developed and where are parts that you are not so developed yet. And then you can have a good idea what to work on. And I will show you an example. And I also want to recommend an article that is on the internet, and you can also find in the reference where here Tanis was doing this conscientiogram, and she was opening her laboratory to the public and writing about her experience with this. And she was writing, the highly asymmetric chart pattern may reflect Thothanic habits that prioritize some consensual attributes and neglect others, and also can predict about the expressed intraconsensual conflicts. So by doing her conscientiogram, she developed an idea where she had some issues to work on, and she was asking the question, or her topic was cognitive structure of belief and habits, how to challenge them. And I found that interesting that she used this approach and found out that this is very useful for her in order to overcome some habits and to deal with those inner conflicts she had. And this is what Tenille was asking. With our evolution, the number of inner conflicts decreases, because for sure here we have the resoma and the desoma. So we over time we are reincarnated, so we resomate, and we will die, so we desomate. So through the time, we will have a lot of resomas and desomas, and during all this time, we will have experiences. We will work on our conflicts, with our inner conflicts, and for sure also with the conflicts that we have with other people. And we will develop our maturity throughout the time. So this is what we call holomaturity. So we develop our intraconsensual structure, and we call this evolution of the consciousness. So with time, we will diminish this number of inner conflicts. So this is the good news, okay? And another technique which is close to this to the conscientiometry that I showed you right now is self-conflictometry. It's a technique it is proposed in a verbet, which is an entry in the Encyclopedia of Conscientiology. And it's also in the references, so you can revisit later on. And it is the act and effect of identifying, listening, quantifying, examining, evaluating, and organizing in a specific technical and thematic way the clashes, divergence, incompatibilities, disagreements, disrupts, distributes, pending issues, disturbances, entropies. And within our micro-universe, we have those inner conflicts. And with this conflictometry, we can really list them, and we can approach them in a more technical way. And in what sense are we going to list them or to evaluate them? What I brought here is this iceberg module, right? We know this from other approaches. What I want to show here, that we can have a kind of superficial conflictometry, that we just look at the intraphysical point of view. But what we want to do here is to really go deep. So what we want to do is that we want to look at the multidimensional way, that we want to take a look from our multiple lives that we have, which means multi-serial approach, and multivehicular means from the approach of the holosoma. Eliane, do you have a comment?
Yes, I have a question here from Hannah Yogan. Which category would the conflict of interest belong to? It involves intentions and values. So some conflicts would have different layers. Do you understand the conflict of interest, Regina? Do you have this expression in German, I suppose?
Well, conflict of interest, I would see if you have different interests, right? For example, you want to have a certain amount of money, you want to have a certain life that you want to have, but you have on the other side the interest that you want to have also a cosmoethical work. So it would be a conflict of interest if you want to bring this together, but you are having a work, for example, that you would not consider very cosmoethical, but you earn a lot of money with this, right? I'm not sure if this is what you mean.
Yeah, it's a kind, but I'll give you another example.
Okay.
For example, you volunteer in an institution that is non-profit, but you have second intentions working there because, for example, you volunteer there, you show that you make a self-promotion there so that you get some clients for yourself, okay? Then this you are in an environment that is for you to volunteer, to donate your time and effort for something, for a good cause. But over there you use that time to influence people to be your customers in your professional life, and then you get benefits from that situation. That is a conflict of interest. You are not being neutral. You are influencing. You are having an opinion over something that is not. Sometimes you have second interest. That's why we call conflict of interests. And how her question is, which category, which kind? From, I suppose that the slide that you explained about Maximiliano, where he categorizes all types of conflicts.
Well, in that sense, let's go back. I'd say in that sense, it's a conflict of intention. This is how he's calling that here, because you have the intention to get some clients, for example, but you also want to work as a volunteer. So in that sense, I would say this is a conflict of intention, because this is also the example that he was giving here. I'm not sure if this is answering the question, Anna. I hope so.
I think it is. I suppose it is, and I can confirm, but I think this is number 5. It's a conflict of intentions. If the person has a second intention, wow. It involves intention and value, so some conflicts would have different layers. I suppose so as well, because as we have categories, there are some, as you mentioned, they are easier to solve or not, not so heavy. Others, you have to go more deep, to go into, to rethink your values, your temperament.
That's true. That's true. But let me go back, because I have a lot of things to tell you still.
Yeah.
All right. So if we're talking about the conflict geometry, right? So it's interesting to think not only in these categories that I showed you before. What I also found interesting, and it's taken from this verbiage, right? That we can also think of other categories in that sense. And for example, or let me call it better, varieties. For example, depending on the scope. So is the conflict arising occasional, or is it a generalized thing? So are you aware of the conflict or not? So, or is it something that is related to the past, to the present, or to the future, for example? Or in which dimension is it taking place, or is it connected to, for example, is it intraphysical or extraphysical? The duration is also interesting to consider. Then the effect, is it acute or is it chronic? The frequency, does it come up sporadically or frequent, or is it permanent? The intensity, is it weak or is it really a strong one, for example? And also the origin. So is it from the mesology, for example, or is it genetic? Is it paragenetic? And is it large or small? So these are varieties that we can really observe and write it down and make this conflict geometry in order to see and to analyze this conflict that we have, in order to really develop a strategy how to deal with this.
It's a way to go deep. It's not easy. It's a
Definitely.
self-research that demands dedication, but the
That's
person can have good profit and a lot of advantages, self advantages for studying this more deeply.
yes, and making themselves aware how this conflict really is, because our normal reaction is, right, we have the conflict, we feel it, and we try to avoid it, right, or even not to feel it, not to perceive it. And this is an interesting approach that I found in the next technique that I want to show you. Oh, I'm not sure why this is so huge that you can hardly read it. And it's called from a verbet as well from the Encyclopedia of Conscientiology. It's the mapping of personal discomfort. What is that? The mapping of personal discomfort is the set of self-investigation procedures aimed at identifying, recording, and analyzing individual discomfort at a holosomatic level. And this is because why I showed the slide before again here with the holosoma, just to remind that occur throughout the day and capable to indicating necessary and self-libertarian intraconsensual recycling. And I think this is really interesting because that was a long time my case that I couldn't hardly identify and had problems to feel the inner conflict within my holosoma. And I, through debates and dialogue with other people, I saw, okay, this is something that does not only happen to me. Sometimes if we are in our day-to-day life and we're trying to function, and to deal with our everyday life, sometimes it's the case that we just don't perceive the inner conflict. And therefore, I find this is a very, very interesting technique in order to go deep and in order to analyze the inner conflict. So I want to recommend this, and I put the source also in the references. And to go to the next topic, so to speak, I want to bring up a sentence or a thought from Valdoviera. It's called, or it is in the Lexico de Autopensatas. To live in peace is to choose the personal holothought and to adjust, to live adjusted to it. And this is the reason why I bring the next technique that I want to recommend in order to approach inner conflicts. Because to live an adjusted life, this is really an important thing in order to deal with inner conflicts. And I come up with a 1 more year of introphysical life technique. And as you said in the beginning, I'm doing this course for 4 years already, and I try to help with the internationalization of that course because I think this is a very, very valuable technique, right?
I agree. It's a great course.
You can find this in the 700 experiments, and it's proposed by Valdoviera. And it supposes that you, from the day on you start the technique, have only 1 year of introphysical life. And this is a technique for me, which is very interesting from the point of view of urgency, because then you can really focus yourself on your life and also on your life purpose, which we call the praxis. And see, okay, a lot of conflicts stem from the fact that we are sometimes not in line with our praxis, right? And if you use this technique, you can really go deep into this topic and see, okay, where could we adjust to our praxis? I remember the question of Anna. What is one of the most serious conflicts that terminal patients, for example, have, right? So sometimes this idea, I have to do something and I didn't do that, and now I have to go, my time is up. And this is something that they're really dealing hard with. And to how can I say, to prevent this topic and to go to this, to really not to come up with this, you can approach this technique in order to see if you're in the line with your praxis. And what I really like about this technique very much, even though it has this title, right, 1 more year of introphysical life technique, where you can think of, oh goodness, this is hard stuff. It is serious. But what I really like is the last point that I put here. So there's a lot of de-dramatization. So it's not about, oh goodness, it's about, okay, how can I readjust my path, and how can I go deep into my topics and into my recycling? So this is another technique I recommend in order to minimize inner conflicts. Yes, that's what I said. Inner conflicts are perfect indicators for the intraconsensual recycling you need to do. So that's the good news about inner conflicts, right? But I think there's another question, right? Or comment from Anna.
It's a comment from Anna Yogan. Conflict of interest is generally expressed in scientific articles that analyze the use of medications or methods or techniques. This is,
Right.
I suppose, for the medical area.
I see. All right.
Yeah,
Thanks. Thanks
some
for clarifying.
yeah. If in the medical area, the doctor, the physician has any conflict of interest, he will choose some specific medication because she's promoting something, some service, some product, and making profit
I see.
out of it.
I see. Right. This could also be related to values, right? So if I want to make a personal profit with the disease, let's suppose not recommending the best medication, but maybe a medication I could earn more money with. So that's a serious one. Yes,
Yeah.
I agree.
So an
Yeah.
example. Okay, people, I hope we have clarified. I will leave Regina to end the lecture, and we have a divulgation. We have an invitation for you.
Right. So I just want to wrap up a little bit, right? There would be so much more to talk about, but the question is for you also to reflect on, are there healthy and unhealthy strategies? For example, the unhealthy one is related to the idea, okay, it's about feeling good, it's about feeling happy, having no conflicts, and so on. So this is not what we mean here, having no conflicts. I think this more or less in our evolutionary level doesn't exist, right? So a healthy strategy is pro-evolution. So this is what I recommend to have in mind, right? If you think about the strategies that you choose. So I want to wrap up here with this cycle, right? Because I think in our evolutionary moment, this is really something that is an ongoing process. The identification of the inner conflict, and then this circle that we have in order to really approach the conflict in the best sense maybe to solve the conflicts or to identify another, because this is sometimes the case. You identify an inner conflict, you do a self-research, but then you realize, okay, there's another there's another conflict underneath. So maybe this is also what was meant by layers that you can identify in the conflict, right?
Very good. We have a comment from Annie Vogt. Thanks a lot, Regina, for the excellent clarification of this important issue for all of us. And Anna Yogan, thanks so much for the presentation. Excellent approach of a complex subject. I do agree. It's a complex subject. Regina brought a summary of lots of techniques, and I think we could spend more hours talking about that, going into more deep into that subject, Regina, because it's
That's true.
a long way to go to solve,
Yeah.
to learn about all these techniques and possibilities.
Yes, this is true. So I just want to show this slide here. If you can see the recording, maybe you can have an idea from different techniques that we have in Conscientiology, right? And for sure, it depends if you're a beginner to the topic or if you already have experience, if you maybe already did some of the techniques or the tools. There are a lot more, as you can see, and this is not a complete list for sure. So I think this is very important. And let me just invite you here. I will skip this. Just one sentence here. The peace of the evolutionary group begins with the inner peace of each consciousness. Therefore, I think this is a very interesting and very important topic, because we are all involved in different groups, right? And yeah, for sure. What are the healthy techniques that you're applying for self-pacification? But in the end, I would like to also inform that we study these topics in depth in the Invisible College of Pacifismology. You can contact us through the website that you can find here. And I would like to leave you with a orto pensata from Valdoviera, which is not displayed here very well, at least in my screen, but it says, mega freedom is intimate peace. So, and I think freedom is all that we're looking for, right? On the way to the Homo sapiens pacificus, or one day the free consciousness. So this was the quick wrap up, so to speak.
Very good, Regina. Thank you so much. I hope our viewers, have enjoyed, and we can have you back again to go more deep, choosing one of these techniques, and we can discuss in more details. It's going to be great, okay? And I will take this opportunity to invite to divulge our next Fundamentals of Evolution course, and that will happen. I'll show you the flyer here, okay? So this is the course. It is starting in September 3rd for Australian time. In fact, in Brazil and USA, it's going to be September the 2nd. And the time zone in Brazil will be at 9 p.m. Okay? But in Australia, it's going to be Saturday morning. It's going to be September the 3rd. Okay, and the course is going to take place on for Brazil time zone on Fridays and Saturdays evening from 9 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. Sorry, 11:30, because each class takes 2 hours and a half. And for Australian, it's going to be Saturdays and Sundays morning from 10 to 12:30 a.m. and 2 hours and a half. And this course has all the essential concepts of Conscientiology. It is a 50 hours course divided in 20 live online classes. And we also have energy work, a half an hour of energy work every class. And our teachers are, we have 8 teachers that are in teaching in this next group, and they are very experienced and are certified teachers by Reaprendência or other conscientiocentric institutions. So you are welcome to join us. If you have interest, contact us at Reaprendência International, okay? So very good. I think we are near the end. So thank you very much again to Instructor Regina. It was great being here. And I hope these ideas can help you to boost your evolution. So thank you very much. See you in our next live. It's very important. I'm gonna tell you when it's gonna be. It's gonna be July 22nd. That is a Friday at 9 p.m. São Paulo time. And in Sydney, it's gonna be Saturday, July 23rd at 10 a.m. We are going to talk about more deeply about the fundamentals of evolution course. And it's going to be with instructors Fabiana Cerato, Jacqueline Cohen, Marlon Muraro, and me, Eliane Voslav. Okay.
Great.
So see you all there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.